expected, 600,000 related to the 14-foot boat, 1.4 million related to the 12-foot boat, and so on. So this is the given information. We've got our total cost pool, we've got our expected activity for that cost pool. Now we need to come up with a rate. So go up to number 6, using the activity level cost information and expected activity, calculate an activity rate. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the total cost pool amount divided by the expected activity, and we're going to come up with an activity rate. That activity rate is how we're going to allocate overhead. Instead of just using one big rate, which was direct labor hours under the traditional system, we're going to break it down into these different types, these different pools, and then we're coming up with a rate. And now let's come up with a per unit cost under the activity-based costing system. So 7, using the activity rates and expected activity by product calculated per unit cost. Alright, so this expected activity comes from this table. So we got the 12-foot boat, so our expected activity is 800,000 for labor-related, 1.4 million for machine-related, machine setups is 2,000, production orders is 800, parts admin is 600, general factory is 1.4 million, and then customer admin is 650. The rate is coming from here, so we've got $3.20 for labor related, machine related is $4.66, machine setups is 500, and so on, and then we extend that, so we multiply the 800,000 times the activity rate, which is $3.20. We come up with the expected amount for that activity pool, and all those added up totals 18,179,547. So we take that divided by our total number of units, which is 400,000 for the 12-foot boat, which we got from our given information. We come up with a per unit cost of $45.45. Doing the same thing for the 14-foot boat, our expected activity is coming from this table over here, and we're saying we got 200,000 for labor-related, 600,000 for machine-related, 6,000 for machine setups, 1,600 for production orders, parts admin is 800, general factory is 600,000, customer admin is 800 times our activity rate. Our activity rate is coming from here. The activity rate is the same as the 12-foot sailboat, but because our expected activity is different, we're coming up with a different extended value. So the total overhead that we're expecting based on the activity-based costing system is $14,820,453. You take that number divided by our total number of expected units that we're expecting to produce, we come up with $148.20 per unit. Alright, so let's flip this over. Now, let's go to this table at the bottom left here, the comparison of costing systems. So, direct material we've got here at 180, direct labor we've got 120. Under activity-based costing and direct labor costing, it's the same, right? Direct materials, direct labor don't change because we can directly trace those. What changes is how we're allocating overhead, right? The activity-based, the job order costing, the process costing, those are methods of allocating overhead. So the overhead that we calculated on the other side for the 14-foot boat was $148.20, and for the 12-foot boat was $45.45. Under the direct labor costing system, it was $66 for each. That drastically changes the dollar value of the cost on a per unit basis for each of the boats. We have for the 14-foot boat, under the activity-based costing is $448 versus $366. On the 12-foot, it's $265 versus $286. That's drastically different because we slice and dice to how we're the total amount into different activities, and we analyze how each of the boats gets built and the different activities and processes that are required to build that, and allocated based on that information. And we came up with a drastically different, instead of the singular single direct labor hour allocation in the traditional system. So in summary, we've got the ABC Systems assigns $20.55 less overhead than the traditional system to each 12-foot sailboat, and then the ABC system assigns $82.20 more overhead than the traditional system to each 14-foot sailboat. Activity-based costing shifts costs from high-volume products produced in large batches to low-volume products produced in small batches. This results from the existence of batch-level and product-level costs. The traditional system assigns the same amount of all overhead costs, including the costs related to production orders, to each 14-foot or 12-foot sailboat. So what is that? We're producing 400,000 of the 12-foot boat and only 100,000 of the 14-foot boat. And so you see, we're assigning more overhead to the smaller volume because it takes more to set up, it takes more of the machine hours for each of those versus it does with a high volume. And you'll see we were losing market share. Well, let's flip it over. What was the given information? It says the company has been gaining market share on its 14-foot sailboat and losing market share on its 12-foot boat. Well, under the traditional system, they were gaining market share on their 14-foot boat because they were way under costing it. They were costing it $366 when it really was costing them $448. So they were probably selling it. They were say they mark it up 25% from cost, and they think this is the cost. The markup is going to be a lot less, and they're probably selling it for a lot less than they really should. That's why they were gaining market share. On the contrary, the 12-foot boat, they were assigning more cost and the traditional than they should have, and so they were probably selling it for too much. That's why they were losing market share on the 12-foot and gaining market share on the 14-foot. All right, let's quickly go through some journal entries related to this. The first one being raw materials. That's pretty simple, right? We purchased 70,890,000 raw materials. Debit raw materials, credit accounts payable. Now, when we transfer our direct materials in the work in process, that was 58 million, remember, and our indirect materials was 12,890,000. We debit manufacturing overhead as we transfer that into our overhead pool, and then we credit raw materials. Now, salaries and wages, remember our direct salaries were 60 million and our indirect salaries were 6,700,000 for a total salaries and wages liability of the total cost of labor, which was 66,700,000. Now, as we take the work in process and we transfer it into out of finished goods, we're gonna debit finished goods for the 151 million, which was the cost, right? And credit work in process. Then we sell it. The total sales volume was given, the 302 million, and then so we're going to debit AR, credit sales revenue, and then we're going to debit cost of goods sold for the amount sold, which is the 151 million, and we're going to credit finished goods. Now we're going to debit. Now we have this overhead. Remember the underapplied, overapplied? Well, if you look at the way we applied our overhead, we have an underapplied overhead of 1.59 million, and you can get this because our indirect materials was 12,890,000. Our indirect labor was the 670 million. Our other overhead was 15 million because remember our allocation was based on this $11 per direct labor hour. So all of that, our overhead applied, remember we estimated the overhead to be 33 million. Well, so our actual overhead applied was the actual overhead applied was less than the actual cost. So we have this underapplied inventory or underapplied overhead in inventory. And how do we get rid of that? Well, we need to debit work in process and credit manufacturing overhead. So that's the journal entry process activity-based costing system. Remember, we're taking all the manufacturing costs and slicing and dicing and getting into smaller pools and allocating that, and it more accurately reflects the cost, and it's the more common way of assigning cost in today's manufacturing economy versus the traditional approach. So if you don't understand that, watch it again, go through the concepts, go through the mechanics of how you come up with the cost. Most of the information that you have is going to be given. It's just setting it up. Follow through the examples and you'll be able to set up the problems for your homework and your exams. Thank you.